Muting the mic.
But I'm not willing to go photo radar to do that.
Ooh, I'd like photo radar. I've been caught by photo radar. Yeah. Just once.
I think Rocky does that deal.
I generally know where most of them are in Portland.
Well, you were sitting here and I was sitting here.
I didn't lower it.
You ready, Steve? Okay. So I will call to order the regular city commission meeting for Oregon City for Wednesday, September 18th, 2019. Prior to the meeting, we had oh, never mind. That was a rental. So call roll, please.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Whatever your name is.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present and accounted for.
Commissioner Rachel L. Smith. Here. Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
And Mayor Dan Holliday.
Here. So if you please stand and join the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have no ceremonies or proclamations tonight. Do we have any citizen comment?
Yes.
Seeing that, Mr. Gifford, Mr. Edgar.
You'll care to draw through.
That'd be a busted straight.
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, my name is William Gifford. I live in Oregon City. Two things. One is my regular monthly announcement about the OCBA coming up next Tuesday. We're having a presentation regarding the situation of land use laws, and someone adjusted this. Land use laws and the homeless situation. It's almost sold out already. It's quite crowded, but tonight is the last night to sign up for that if you'd like. I'm not doing it. There. Yes.
Are we done?
You can just, no, you can keep talking.
I can just stop talking. Yeah.
There's the pot calling kettle black. Will that work?
The other thing quickly I wanted to mention is last Saturday was the car show downtown. Great show. One of the best ever. I really, really enjoyed it. And one of the things that I noticed as I was walking down there is that I went to do some posting online, and there isn't a Wi-Fi available down there. I just want to plant that seed. I just think that would be a real nice amenity for our city to have an area with free Wi-Fi going down Main Street. That's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you, City Commission, Mayor Holliday.
You are?
Paul Edgar, Oregon City.
Thank you.
And the Historic District of Kenema. It's been a while since I've talked to you about a house that needs on 3rd Avenue and Ganong Street that is where a fence has been built out into the city right-of-way by 17 feet. And we're hoping that we know that it needs a City Commission right-of-way permit to exist. And that has not happened. But most importantly is there's a question that seems in somebody's minds that this house built 300 feet of fencing. 100 feet of it's brand new, where there was never a fence. Our code calls for the fact that when you build greater than 30% of a structure is new, it requires a complete review of that whole fence. And that fence went through an Enrod area right through Coffee Creek. And nothing was said or done where, in fact, there's code that prohibits that from happening. And so, for some reason, we never really get that resolved. Also, we know that this fence, and I would love to invite any of you to come down and take a look at it, provides obstructions of view that do not comply with our code. So when a car is coming down Ganong Street, it cannot see the oncoming car coming up Third Avenue and trying to make the corner. And anybody that wants to come down there, we'll set cars up right there in the roads, and you can take a look at it and do it exactly as per code. And you can see that it's not in compliance. Somewhere along the line, this has been going on for years and years. And it's wrong, and it should be resolved, and I don't know why we can't move ahead and just have a full planning session on it, take it through, because this has to go through city planning by code, and it never did. It should. A full application should be taken through HRB, through transportation, all reviewed through, because it's going through an NROD area, it needs to go through the Natural Resources Committee. None of this has ever happened, and it needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
No.
Seeing none, we'll move on. Public hearings, 6A, 19-521, first reading of ordinance number 19-1016, amending the Oregon City Municipal Code, Chapter 12.32, heritage trees. Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. The city has adopted a heritage tree designation. It allows us to appreciate trees of a certain size or species. And so we have that in our code. The Natural Resources Committee has proposed some revisions to that code in order to make the process to designate a heritage tree more streamlined. And then also, they've taken a look at some of those owner consent requirements. Pete Walter is our senior planner here to tell you a little bit more.
Thank you. Good evening. The Natural Resources Committee recommended two pretty significant changes to the code, which they feel would encourage the voluntary nomination of heritage trees. The first thing is they removed the requirement for a arborist report for the condition of the trees, feeling that that was a significant impediment to that and disincentive. And that doesn't mean that the city commission could not require a report prior to the final designation, but the initial process would not require that as a codified requirement. And the second thing is all of the nominations would be submitted prior to the end of the year, and one recommendation on all of those nominations would be moved forward before Arbor Day of every year, so that it's just a bulk process of nominations, and people would have the whole year to apply in that case. Owner consent would be required in all situations, including nominations on public and city-owned property. A tree mitigation table has been added to indicate the number of replacement trees required if a heritage tree is removed. And a sentence was added that native heritage trees must be replaced with a heritage tree species. And the NRC also clarified that if a heritage tree is lawfully removed, either due to death or disease, that the replaced trees would not be subject to further protection. So basically, they're just replanting those trees, and if they, at some point in the future, grow to the size where they can be nominated again, then they could do that. Thank you. There are a couple of small errors that we wanted to change. Capitalization of Community Development Director, capitalization of City Commission, and capitalization of the Natural Resources Committee, and also a reference in the consent section, which is 12.32040B. The reference to Chapter 12.08 should be changed to 12.08.025.
Okay, let's take, do you have a question, or can you wait until after the public comment? Okay, so we have two public comments, Ms. Novak and Ms. Dahlsrud.
Sorry, I hurt my knee. I'll go first. My name is Dorothy Dalsrud this week. And I'm here to talk about the heritage trees. You all know that I've been working on the heritage tree program through the NRC and with Dr. Nancy Brichat, for the last 3.5 years. Thank you very much for considering taking away the arborist report. The reason being is that originally you didn't have to have an arborist report. That was no problem. We got 5 trees up on line, then 1 tree blew down. That was under arborist care, cable taken care of, but it had seen the end of its life. So it came down. Then the arborist reports came back online that needs to have an arborist report taken. Since then, not one single nomination has come up for the fact that it's a financial burden on a private citizen to have that done. An arborist report can cost several hundreds of dollars to a couple $1,000s, as we all know. And to take a tree down with your options, and we can go on that story, but I'm not. I'm going to stay on task. Heritage trees. We have a very beautiful opportunity here to set up an example. One, thank you very much again for considering taking off the arborist report. That really unshackles people's hands. The second is remove and replace. If you remove a heritage tree, it would have to go through a review board. It would have to then at that point probably have an arborist report to say why you want it taken down. Is it sick? Is it in my way? Do I want to put a new addition onto my home? Do I want to put an auxiliary home in that spot? Well, the protection is only $600 for that tree. As we've seen with examples of oaks and walnuts and other native trees, those can be a value of far more than $600 just in cut up cord wood. And that's a pitiful way to take care of a beautiful ancient tree. Now, we're all talking about ancient trees here that we're nominating. So, with that in mind, I would encourage you with the $600 protection that we have currently being suggested. At one point, I think it was $300, and then it got boosted to $600. I suggest you boost it again. The reason being is that if I had a heritage tree and I wanted to save it, then I sold my home. And that covenant is on there. Someone can look at it and go, I only have to take that tree down for $600. I can put up another tree that has no protection on it, cut that down because there's no protection on it, and I don't even need a permit. Or if I do, it's free. So it's like a game someone would play. And that is a game that's played. Okay, so looking at cities around us. Tualatin.
Your time is up.
I
Thank
don't
you,
have
ma'am.
a problem with her having a little more time.
Ms. Novak?
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity, and I appreciate it. I could go into an in-depth discussion regarding the benefits of our urban trees. I'm sure you've heard this before: increasing urban biodiversity, climate change mitigation, filters for urban pollutants, and cooling the air. We know what has happened to cities that have cut down trees for developments, and they become hotspots. So we know that. So I'm not going to go in depth into that, but I'm respectfully asking for your support for this. And I appreciate all the hard work that Dee Dee and Dr. Brochat have put into this. So again, just respectfully asking for your support. And I do agree that increasing the fine, there's some benefits to that. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I want to remind you guys, we're going to try to use the request to speak buttons because sometimes my peripheral vision isn't all that great.
I don't know where that is.
So Commissioner Lyle Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, okay.
I guess my first question is about the tree replacements. If I'm reading this correctly, hypothetically, if a property had a single 25-inch diameter tree, or say 24 inches, they would have to replant 9 trees on their property?
That's correct.
That's only after it had been nominated and put through the heritage tree process, right?
Well, right, but I'm trying to envision the size of a lot that would take to be able to accommodate 9 trees. Are we specifying the size? I mean, is this same type, equal replacement, or are we talking about, I mean, how is someone supposed to fit 9 trees on a piece of property? So I'm just kind of doing a balance check on
Is there not a provision for fee in lieu of in this, like we have in regular commercial development?
Or offset.
We could add fee in lieu as an option. It's not currently in there.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I want trees to be replanted. I just want it to be reasonable, and I'm trying to envision my own piece of property, which is a decent sized lot. I bought an older lot, so I had more space, but I don't think I have room to plant 9 trees to give them plenty of room to grow ideally and
Sure.
replace this one big one, so.
Yeah. Yeah, we would need to work with the owner on a plan that looks at the species and where they're going to be planted. And if it does seem like they're not able to all be planted on the lot, then we would look probably at alternatives. That's the way we do it with other codes, such as the tree protection code. We have options to plant off-site. We have options to pay fee in lieu of planting. And
Where does the money from the fee in lieu of end up?
currently, the fee goes into a tree mitigation fund that we use
Okay.
for planting citywide.
All right.
Yeah,
It funds our Friends of Trees contract.
currently, yeah.
So is that a change that would need to happen if we need to add a
I
fee
think
in lieu
so. That
of
would be
piece?
clarifying it. It would be a good amendment to make.
The only other thing that I thought was confusing when I was reading through the chapter was that in one of the sections, it is essentially saying that anybody can nominate a tree. However, yes, it's very clear a couple of sections later that you have to have owner consent. And it's not clear to me if a citizen, say I nominate a tree on my neighbor's property, at what point is my neighbor notified that I've nominated a tree on their property?
I would say almost immediately the nomination comes in, we will, they would either have to be contacted by the person nominating them to encourage them to sign the nomination form as the owner, or we will contact them as staff and tell them that a nomination has been filed and that their consent is necessary to move forward.
So before it moves
Yeah,
forward anymore, you'd
Yes.
have to get the property owner consent before you go through presenting it to.
before we even go to the Natural Resources
Right.
Committee. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that wasn't
Yeah.
overly clear, and I felt like the two sections were kind of,
Yeah.
in,
Okay.
I mean, they just seem to be in contradiction to each other, but yes, I mean, you do get there, but.
Commissioner McGriff.
Yeah, just to address, I didn't plan to talk about this, but since Rachel brought it up, I would not support a fee in lieu. I think that if a tree goes down, it needs to be planted. I'd like to see something in this that doesn't preclude a larger tree being planted. I agree with you that the 9 trees sounds kind of ridiculous, but what about a larger tree in lieu of that tree? And people should not be able to get off by paying money into a fund. I understand it's the Friends of Trees provision, but I agree with Dee Dee in the fact that the number needs to be really high, and we recommended that when I was on Planning Commission, that we wanted to see that fee jacked up significantly so it isn't so easy for someone to do it, and that they would need to be thinking twice about that. A couple of questions. I want to make sure on section, I'm looking at the red line version, in section 12.32.010, that it says other broadleaf species and other conifer species, so this would not preclude any trees that aren't on this list, because obviously I know about a couple of sequoias, but while they're not native, but they were huge. It could be something else out there. You know, we used to have, before it died, we used to have a unique monkey tree in the McLaughlin neighborhood, and that probably should have been on the heritage tree list, but it passed its time, and unfortunately it's gone, but it was in the front, you remember, next to Bob Light. Bud Lane's house. That's where it used to be. For those of you who live here well know who Bud Lane is, there was a monkey tree in his front yard. 12.32.040, consent of owner. I think it is rather specious that the city of Oregon City, who is a tree city, would require consent for trees that are in our parks and other places to have to get consent. I think that Oregon City should step up and get its trees nominated first before any private property owners come in, even though we already have a few, because that's what we're supposed to be doing. I think we need to be held to a higher standard, and we need to do that. We talk in here about also getting permission from the county or other people. Again, I think local government needs to step up. I don't have any problem with them, but I think the city of Oregon City, we need to get our stuff together and get our stuff designated right away. Again, the $600 is too small. I think it needs to be, I'd even say $1,500, maybe even $2,000. And I'd like to see provision in here again for larger trees to be planted, that they're not precluded. I had a situation where I needed to replace a tree on my property, and I was told that I could replace, even though I paid for the trees to begin with and planted the trees myself and got a permit to do it. I was told if I wanted to take this tree out, I needed to plant, X many trees someplace else. And I said, no, I am not going to do that because I want the trees in the neighborhood and back into my parking strip. We had a big tree program three times now in the McLaughlin neighborhood, and we have repopulated a lot of areas that don't have trees. And I think we have the option to do that.
Anybody else?
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Smith? Sorry.
The question I have is under definitions. Whether or not the hazardous and it's listed hazardous or diseased trees, and basically it gives two terms and two different definitions. Why aren't those separated? Because it can be read either way, that it just seems that we're giving two terms and then two definitions. Why aren't those different? I mean, it could be hazardous and disease, but it could just be hazardous, but this implies that it kind of is the same.
What section are you on?
Definitions 12.32020,
Okay.
the first section.
Let me get there.
So a diseased tree could become hazardous but not necessarily. I think that's a distinction that we can make. We've made that distinction in the definition section of the code for other parts of the tree code. So, we could separate those out.
Are permits going to be required under that section?
I beg your pardon?
Are permits going to be
Permits?
required under this entire section?
Well, in this situation, if a heritage tree, in order to remove the designation, they have to get city approval.
So if somebody says, gee, we think this tree is an imminent hazard, is there going to be a permit required?
What,
Yeah, we would.
are you talking about a tree that has already been named a heritage tree?
No, apparently they're saying it under this definition, an imminent hazard tree. I'm assuming that's already been designated. Is that true or not?
Yes.
Yes,
And
okay.
we would probably use the same type of permit that we use for public street trees, since this heritage designation is essentially giving public protection to a tree on private property. But the process of obtaining a permit could be similar.
Can that permit also have a denial? Because I don't think it should automatically be approved. And is there an appeal process in there in case somebody disagrees that it's an imminent hazard or it's a problem or it's something else?
I think the way to handle that is if it's approved by the city commission and the NRC, then you should go back to those bodies to remove the designation. So I don't know about an appeal process, but there'd certainly be an opportunity to be heard.
Okay, as long as there's somewhere in there that there's an opportunity to be heard, that would be part of due process.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Okay, so there's a couple things here. One, I think if you make the fee to take a heritage tree down so high, then it's going to serve the same purpose as the other comments have been made about people would not have those trees designated, because in the future, if they want to take it down, they're going to have to pay $2,000 or whatever the case may be. I think there's a happy medium somewhere. I'm not sure it's $600, but I'm positive it's not $2,000.
I meant fee in lieu of,
Right.
not to take the tree down. They can't, I don't want people to use the fee in lieu of as an excuse to take a tree down, and I'm not sure how to get
Well,
it.
but that's not what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about heritage trees.
I think it's interesting that I was probably one of the original, helped author of the original Heritage Tree program, which was supposed to be a feel-good incentive program for private property owners to nominate trees, of which there is no benefit to them financially.
Yeah,
It is a little discouraging how punitive this has become.
Right.
And if I were a property owner, I would
would
not
never
apply
do
for
it.
this program.
No, I wouldn't either.
I wouldn't either.
Especially if the permit could be denied and then I'd have to appeal to the commission. I mean, I'm going into this voluntarily as a property owner. It's a
Yeah,
volunteer program.
I'm okay with where it's at now. I think the point I'm making, and I've been very clear on this from day one, that I am not interested in the city regulating trees on private property. I believe that those trees belong to the people who bought the land. And that, while we could have a separate discussion about trees that belong to the city or the county or the college or whatever else may be, I think that the private property owners have the absolute right to do what they wish with their landscape. Whether it includes a 250-year-old walnut tree like I have in my backyard, or whether it's a 10-year-old, fir tree that somebody planted along their side yard.
And I think that's always been we've kind of evolved, we didn't regulate trees really, and then we started with street trees, and we had the discussion, should we regulate trees all throughout the city? And I think we've probably started and stopped that discussion probably 3 times in my tenure here. And, so it's become street trees, or it's become part of the subdivision application. We've been willing to do it there, but we've never gone wholesale. So, heritage trees was kind of created out of that process as well. And so, like I said, I think it'll work. I think that I agree. You nominate a tree on your property and you're going to have to put 9 back.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't think that was the original intent. I get why we're there now, because folks don't want trees to come down. And I think that's a bigger discussion about regulating trees on private property.
So it sounds like we have changes to make to this.
Has staff heard enough to go back and do some work on this and bring it back to us in a couple months?
I heard all the changes that you guys identified. Do you want us to make all of those changes, or I'm a little unclear on which changes?
Where are you unclear?
So it sounds like, can we just go through real quick?
Sure.
Sounds like we want to separate the definition of hazardous or diseased trees to be hazardous tree and diseased tree.
Right?
It sounds like we want to, there was a question on owner consent for city property, if we should require owner consent for heritage trees on city property.
Yes.
No.
So can I give you a couple of examples?
Yes, please.
Okay. I think that the commission, either through the manager's office, or if you don't like my decision, through the commission itself, should have some say on whether we want to go through this process. There's a beautiful sequoia tree up by the pool. It is pushing a retaining wall over. Do we nominate that? If we do nominate, do we take the retaining wall out, which was potentially holding up part of the root? I mean, it's not as just straightforward as it's a beautiful tree in the middle of a park. So I would highly recommend that you at least retain some ability to consider the situation, because not all situations are alike.
Right, well, and if we're talking about it, I was at the police building meeting today, like I do every Wednesday, and we have 4 white oaks up there that are on our property now, that, you know, one of them has some problems because a big branch fell off of it a few days ago or whatever, and then we saw, you could see through the space, and so we've got, you know, we're probably gonna end up banding it or whatever and making it better, but the fact is that, you know, as we redevelop that facility, there may come the time when we wanna take out a couple of those trees. And if they get nominated, then that just begins, you know, it's a problem for us down the road, if we're gonna put a city hall there or somewhere else. So, you know, anyway, move forward.
So it sounds like that one is to be determined.
Yes.
Okay. There was the couple
Larger
of,
tree? You have the option to plant larger trees. What we're proposing is cross-referencing the 1741 priorities for replanting section of the code that it currently exists, and then writing in a section that allows you to either plant the number of trees 2-inch caliper or the equivalent inches in a larger tree.
I think that would be reasonable. People should have an option.
Okay.
and do we want to include fee in lieu as an additional option if you can't fit all the trees on site?
Well, I mean, one, I think 9 trees is excessive no matter how you look at it. You know, I've got almost an acre and I'd have a hard time putting 9 trees on that, so.
I think the provision that Mr. Walter was talking about, that he cross-referenced, would allow, if you can't fit them on your site, the community development director could work with the applicant to locate the trees off-site. So you'd still get planting, you wouldn't have fee in lieu, but they would be off-site.
I'm okay with that.
Carrie, could they also, in lieu of, let's say, whatever the number is, plant a larger tree?
Yes, well, that's, I think,
We'll
was
amend
it
that.
adding that?
think that
That would
should-
be included too.
Those should be the first priorities as opposed to off-site.
Okay,
Sure.
Okay,
on.
so no fee in lieu, but you can plant off-site, and the cost for removal of a heritage tree is proposed to be $600. There's comments on that to go higher. So it's the penalty for removal, unlawful
I have no
removal.
appetite for a higher fee than that.
She's talking about unlawfully,
Yeah.
not lawfully, unlawfully.
Yeah,
wouldn't
I
you
know
need
the
to be-
difference.
Bringing forward a different chapter for, I mean, aren't we diving into another area of changing?
No,
fee
we
schedule
actually
or-
have the fee written into the code in this
Okay.
sense, as opposed to normally we reference back to a
Which
separate
section
chapter. So
is it in
it's, if you're looking at the red lines, it's
Yeah.
on the top of the
Last
last page, the bottom line of subsection D, right above where it's highlighted in blue. It says, the removal of or damage to a heritage tree or stand in violation of this chapter shall constitute a civil infraction subject to code enforcement procedures of chapter 1.16 and/or chapter 1.20, except that the penalty for unlawful removal of a heritage tree shall be $600 for each tree removed or damaged.
So I assume the Natural Resources Committee, or there were multiple reviews of this, and the Planning Commission, did they, any of these other committees ever discuss this fee factor? or were
The
they
fee
okay?
was discussed by the Natural Resources Committee, but there was not consensus to increase it.
Well, I think if there wasn't consensus there. Anything else on your list?
That's all.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask for a motion that we continue this until staff can bring it back and have worked in the various amendments. So moved.
I'll second it, but I would like a date certain.
We could do the next meeting.
Which one?
We could do October 2nd.
Go on to the 16th. We have, the second meeting in October is October 16th.
That's fine.
It's perfect.
Okay with the maker?
Yes.
Further discussion? Call a roll.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
I still think the penalty should be a little higher, but I've already stated that.
Commissioner Rachel Lau Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
and Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. We have nothing under general business. Does anybody want to pull anything from the consent agenda? Then there's our motion.
I so move.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rachel Law Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Mayor Dan Holliday.
Aye. Mr. Manager, you have anything for us?
I do not.
All right. Does anybody on the commission have anything to report? The only thing I have is I did attend the police building meeting today, and either early this week or late last week, we discovered a 26 by 6 by 6 foot septic tank that was not commissioned, not decommissioned, but it had been, you know, they cut the pipe off and covered it up, and it's full.
Who discovered that, the contractors?
So we're working with DEQ and the architect and engineering firms to make a determination as to which way is better to pump it out and take it completely out, or pump it out and take some feet off of it and fill it with stuff so that we can because it's in the way of a couple of footings for the building. So we continue to discover things about the site. We found in the last month they found a well or two that were missing. You know, no one really knew where they came from or what they were used for, other than it was obviously the big 6 foot one was for drinking water, and it was actually under the old building. So we continue to move ahead. We are currently very close to being on schedule and on budget, and I will keep you informed as we move forward.
So Dan, I'm curious, you said we. So did you discover it?
I say we in the royal we sense
Okay, I was
of
just curious because
the contractors,
I'm assuming the contractor discovered it, because I'd be a little nervous if you were out there digging around for septic tanks.
you'd be hard pressed to find me with a shovel in my hand these days.
Well, there might be some really cool artifacts in
All right,
that
with that,
well.
we are adjourned. And